How'd you get in the news?
Actually, I sort of fell into it. I was a production major. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. I was a production major and had planned on interning. Was a teaching assistant at the University of Miami and was planning on working on a children's show, production assistant on a children's show. But when my internship came up, they went on hiatus. So I had to find something else. So I decided I wanted to try out the newsroom at the other station across town. This was during the Mariel boat lift in Miami. We had riots going on, and it was one of those all hands on deck situations. And since I already knew how to use a lot of the equipment in terms of helping the photographers running audio and carrying the recorder. Back then, cameras and recorders were two separate pieces of gear. I knew how to run the recorder and work with the photographers. They put me out on the street in riot zones as an intern with a guy with some spare set of gear, and ended up helping cover the riots and the boat lift and all the weird things that were going on that summer, a presidential election, for presidential campaigns. So I spent my days in the newsroom and my nights in production because I was living at a frat house on the campus, which was the most disgusting place you've ever seen in your life. So I really didn't have any incentive to go home. So I would spend days in the newsroom and nights in production and go home at midnight and then come back at 9 o'clock the next morning and do it all over again. So I learned a lot about the way the newsroom is run, and I also learned a lot about how the production end of the news is run as well, and just general production at the TV station. And I saw a career path. Never intended to get this far into it, but I thought it was interesting. The news was always changing. It was something different every day. You never knew what you were going to be in for. You got to go cool places that people didn't normally get to go and do cool things. So that's how I fell into it. I went back to the same TV station to ask for help on a geography project. I wanted to do a documentary, a video instead of turn in a paper. And while I was in the manager's office, the 11 o'clock producer stuck his head in the office and said, "Ruth, when are you going to hire this guy?" She looked at me, she says, "What do you do on weekends?" I said, Nothing, absolutely nothing. Totally free, totally open. What do you need?" Turned out they had a new guy coming in from West Palm Beach and needed somebody to work with him to run the assignment desk for him so he could produce the newscast. And I started off doing that. Eventually ended up as an editor and continued to work the assignment desk. Ended up as a what they call a field producer, which is kind of a helper to the reporters. You go out, and when they have complicated stories, you go out and maybe do some interviews with them, keep track of sound, and help organize their coverage as an assistant to the reporters. I stayed in the newsroom sometimes and worked with the producers as an assistant to the producers, doing some writing, coordinating all the live shots, all the live stuff, getting the tape feeds in, getting supers for the stories, all the coordination that goes along with a live shot. And back then, live shots were way more complicated than they are now. Nowadays, you just push a button on a box and you're live. Back then, you had to take a big old truck out to somewhere, put up a big old mast, tune in the signal, and feed actual videotape back via microwave. So somebody had to take the feed in, somebody had to make sure it got where it was going. There were no computers back then, so everything was done over the phone. I was the guy on the other end taking in all the information and making sure it got distributed to the people that needed it. Then I got to cue the live shots during the newscast. So I did that for a few years, and then got the opportunity to go to Fort Myers in a management role, and basically coordinating all their live coverage, and stayed there for a few years. But that was one of those stations where people did everything. You didn't wear just one hat there. So they sent me out to cover some stories. They needed me to anchor some newscasts. They needed me to produce some newscasts. Then it was produce some specials. Then it was, oh, by the way, our public affairs director is gone. We need somebody to create a brand new Sunday morning show and be the host. You're it. So that led me to doing that for a few years. And then I got a call to go to Memphis, Tennessee as the police beat reporter, and covered one of the most violent cities in the country for a while. Then got married there, and my wife got a job in Los Angeles. I followed her to Los Angeles, became a producer at CNN, then later a correspondent and an anchor for the Financial News Network, which is now CNBC. Covered some big stories out there, earthquakes and financial scandals and bank scandals and Hollywood scandals. Did a lot of that stuff. FNN got bought by CNBC and shut down, so I got the opportunity to go back to Tennessee. Anchored the news in Tennessee, covered the news in Tennessee, produced the news in Tennessee, did a little bit of everything there as well. And then after 20 some years there, decided I needed to move on, and got the chance to go to Southern Illinois as the 6 and 10 o'clock anchor. Did that for a few years, and then got the chance to come to Waco, Texas to work at KXXV, and again doing a little bit of everything, doing some reporting, doing some producing, anchoring a few newscasts. Just really enjoying it because the business has changed so much. Because back in my day, you went out as part of a 2 or 3 person team. Nowadays, you do it all yourself, and I find it to be a little bit more rewarding. I mean, I go out, I shoot my own video, I edit my own stories, I write my own stuff, and at the end of the day, I really feel like I've accomplished something.